Hi, my name is Trevor Klee, and this is another video on the LSAT reading comprehension process. Um, so today I thought I'd be covering a paired passage. So first, I'm going to go over again the process for reading comprehension in general, and then we're going to test it on a paired passage in specific. So first of all, the reading comprehension process is based around a really simple idea, which is you're never tested around the entirety of the passage. So no one's ever going to be like, oh, write an essay on this. No one's going to be like, oh, connect every single part of the reading comprehension passage and like compare it to another passage. No, that's not how the test works. The test asks you specific questions about specific parts of the reading comprehension passage. The whole trick is to pick out the right parts, answer just those parts, read, understand, and answer questions about just those parts and ignore the rest. If you can do that, if you can understand exactly what they're going to ask you questions on, you're going to score perfectly. If you can't, or if you get distracted by other parts, it'll be more difficult. So my whole process is based around this idea of find the parts that matter, understand those parts, and answer the questions on those parts. So this is by the way, this process is especially helpful for people who have trouble with timing or for slow readers because, if you have trouble with timing, it's probably because you're reading too much. So, let's stop you from reading too much and let's get you reading exactly the right things. How are we doing that? Well, we're going to do our steps to the process. Cool. All right. So process is pretty simple. In order to get the exact right things, our first step with any passage is we skim it. We want to get a basic idea of what it's about and how it's organized. We want to get the main point of it. So my preferred method for this is I always focus on first sentence, last sentence. Now, if you're a particularly slow reader or you find yourself easily lost, I would say only read the first sentence and last sentence. I know it's weird, but that's really where your main idea is, and the rest is just going to have details that confuse you. Otherwise, if you're a somewhat faster reader, you can read the rest, but still focus on first and last. When I say focus, things that you really want to pay attention to are how the passage is organized, what each paragraph is about, what first paragraph, second paragraph, third paragraph, and also points of view. Who believes what? What does the author believe? What do the people mentioned believe? Does the author agree with them? Does the author disagree with them? So that sort of thing. So when we're getting our main idea, let's pay attention to point of view. So for paired paragraphs, one really important thing that I'm going to mention or that I'm going to emphasize here is keep passages separate. So one mistake that I notice all the time that my tutoring clients make with these paired passages is they combine them into like one big passage and they get real confused, which is a problem because the questions will always, emphasize what does this passage say? What does this passage say? How does A compare to B? And if you combine it into one big passage and you're like, the main idea of both passages is, you're going to get really confused. You have to have a main idea for the first passage and a main idea for the second passage. This is before you look at the questions. If you don't have that, this is what passage A is about. This is what passage B is about. You're going to get confused. All right. So we skim the passage. And we do that once per passage, of course. Next, we go to the questions. For each questions, we analyze it for key terms. So this is like, it might be a specific line. It might be a specific term, that sort of thing. Like, what is the history of ... Or how we weaken the author's conclusion that something. And so if I see how do we weaken the author's conclusion that, I'm going to go straight to the passage and say, okay, where does he talk about this thing? I'm going to read exactly what he says. I'm going to make sure I really understand that portion. Before I've skimmed it, I didn't really get it. Now I make sure I really understand what exactly he's saying. Okay, so that's really step 3. make sure you understand what he's saying. If it's a weak in this, it's what's the conclusion? How does he get to the conclusion? What are the premises or the reasoning? All right. By the way, if this is the sort of question that just says, the author would agree with all of the following except, or something like that, something that doesn't have a lot of clues, you just skip straight to step 4. If there's no clues on what to read, obviously you can't analyze the question. If it's just like, we can most likely infer from the passage, that not worthwhile going through the passage and seeing what you can infer. All right, last step, step 4. So we've analyzed the question. We found exactly the part in the passage we need to read. We've read it. We've understood it. Now we return to the question and look through the answer choices. So we read and analyze each answer choice carefully. There's always going to be trap answers. Only, always, never. Pay attention to those. In terms of the mistakes that people make, they spend so much time being like, oh, I need to understand every detail in the passage. And then they're just like going through the answer choices like bam, bam, bam. No, don't do that. You don't need to spend that much time on the passage if they haven't asked you a question about it. You need to spend a lot of time on the answer choices. You need to read those carefully. We're going to cross out any that seem incorrect. And by the way, for seem incorrect, that's both based on our knowledge of the passage, and you can also frequently cross it out based on common sense. Like, these passages are all taken from, real academic journals or newspapers or whatever. Like, the passages never say anything that's outright wrong or incorrect. So, if they say in, an answer choice, oh, the sky is, purple, don't pick that one. Like, the passage, regardless of whether you remember seeing that in the passage or not, the passage isn't going to say the sky is purple. It's a real passage from a real journal. The other thing that I want to point out here, so we're going to cross out any that seem incorrect, and we're going to pick dumb ones. And what I say by dumb ones, or what I mean by dumb ones, is ones that seem correct, but they don't seem particularly intelligent. Like, I saw one the other day that was like, sometimes, occasionally, like, you can find that such and such happens in history. And it's like, yeah, I don't even remember seeing that in the passage, but yeah, if sometimes, occasionally, that happens in history, yeah, history is a really long time. Lots of things happen in history. I'm sure that thing happened. So I was like, yep, I'm picking that one. And it wasn't a smart answer. If you gave that answer in school, your teacher would be like, that, why would you say that? That's not really, it's not really relevant. But in the LSAT, we're just looking for the correct answer. We're not looking for a smart answer. And I'd say that's a big difference that people get mixed up on, like reading comprehension versus logical reasoning. I never give this advice in logical reasoning because dumb answers in logical reasoning are almost always wrong. But dumb answers in reading comprehension are frequently correct. All right, so here's our steps. Skim the passage, go to the questions, analyze the question for key terms, go to the passage, understand the passage, go to the question, look through the answer choices. Now, a couple things here that I just want to say. One is, if you break this down, not only is this going to help you with your reading, it'll also help you troubleshooting your reading. If you get a reading question wrong, it went wrong in one of these steps. You maybe misunderstood the organization of the passage. You misunderstood the question. You misunderstood the passage, or you misunderstood the answer choices. And that ability to troubleshoot is so important because that's how you improve. If you can't troubleshoot a specific step, you cannot improve. So that's one thing. The other thing I'd say is sometimes we have a question that the really annoying question, so they have no clue in the original question, and then the answer choices ask you really specific details about it. Those ones, and I don't remember if we have one in this paired passage. For those ones, if there's no clue whatsoever in the question and then the answer choices are really specific, we cross out what we can, and then whatever is left, we take the key terms from the answer choices and look it in the passage. So it's not worth taking the time to look every answer choice in the passage, because those sorts of questions are huge time sucks. You just have to, cross out the ones that seem incorrect and just any that seem like they could be correct, then you go back to the passage. Go back, understand it, and then go back to your answer choice. So if there's no clue here, then we're going to go back up here and then go down, down. All right, cool. So that's pretty much it. Let's actually go on to the passage now. So this is a paired passage. So this is I've adapted these paired passages actually from Wikipedia. They're not real. The questions are very LSAT realistic question. The passages are, original adapted passages from Wikipedia. I couldn't do real LSAT questions because if you try to put a real LSAT question on YouTube, LSAT comes to your house and they break your windows. But actually, no, they will literally threaten lawsuits. That's happened to multiple people on YouTube. They'll be like, you can take the video off of YouTube or you can pay us like something ridiculous, like $60 for every person who sees your video. It's silly. So yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm doing a original passage here. So let's do this. So paired passage. So we're gonna focus here on the first sentence and last sentence. So, and we're going to keep our passages separate. So let's start. So passage A, we get disenfranchisement after the Reconstruction era in the United States of America, especially in the southern states. It's based on a series of laws, new constitutions, practices in the South, deliberately used to prevent Black citizens from registering to vote and voting. Their actions were designed to thwart the objective of the 15th Amendment, which sought to protect the suffrage of freedmen after the American Civil War. Okay, so basic idea, we're talking about disenfranchisement in the Reconstruction era in the southern states that was used to prevent Black citizens from voting, and it was trying to thwart the 15th Amendment. Makes sense. This is what we're discussing. All right, next up, during the later Reconstructions, beginning in the 1870s, white Democrats used violence by paramilitary groups such as the Ku Klux Klan, as well as fraud to suppress Black Republican voters and turn Republicans out of office. Regaining control of state legislators, Democrats were alarmed by a late 19th century alliance between Republicans and populists. All right, so basically we're starting in with the history. We're saying in the later elections of the Reconstruction era, they start using violence and fraud to suppress Black voters and suppress Republicans. All right, last, control of state legislators. White Democrats added to previous efforts and achieved widespread disenfranchisement, 1890 to 1908, passed new constitution, the Republican Party was nearly eliminated. All right, so it's specifically so we're continuing on a history, right? Now we're on 1890 to 1908, and they achieve control of state legislators, and they do disenfranchisement by law. And then the Republican Party was nearly eliminated in the region for decades. Okay, so this makes sense overall. We're just getting a brief history of disenfranchisement in the Reconstruction era in the southern states, specifically by Democrats, right? So, it's Reconstruction era, disenfranchisement. 1870s, we get violence and fraud. 1890 to 1908, we get disenfranchisement by law. Cool. That makes sense. All right, passage B. Smith versus Allwright questioned whether or not states had the constitutional rights to deny voters based on party membership. Smith was attempting to cast his vote for a Democratic primary in which they were being nominated. Okay. So this is a specific Supreme Court case where we were trying to deny voters based on party membership. And Smith was trying to vote for a Democratic primary. And here we got holding policies is inherently discriminatory. Question was whether Texas Democratic Party was able to make policies to please. Smith argued did not allow him to participate in the state election. All right, so you notice I'm not super concerned about the details here. It's just the idea is, okay, so you can't, the policies inherently discriminatory. Question was whether the Democratic Party could do this. So we see how this is connecting back to Democrats in past today. So here it's a Texas Democratic Party that's not allowing a Black man to vote. And so it's is that illegal? And in this ruling, Supreme Court had considered Grovey v. Townsend, similar case, something, white voters. Ruling in Smith v. Allwright reversed this decision, concluding the state of Texas simply delegated its authority to the Democratic Party. All right, so in this ruling, they considered Grovey v. Townsend, and then final ruling is that I guess they reverse Grovey v. Townsend, and they say Texas had delegated its authority to the Democratic Party. So overall, passage B, just really basic about like Smith v. Allwright. They try to deny voters based on party membership, and this is in Texas. And then second paragraph, could they do this? Third paragraph, they considered Grovey v. Townsend, which is a similar thing, and then they reversed it and said state of Texas had delegated its authority. So, in the first passage, we have like overall Reconstruction. In the second paragraph, we have this specific disenfranchisement thing going on in Texas. All right. So, and you notice we're going to make sure we like keep these separate. Like we're not getting confused here. Passage A and passage B are both about disenfranchisement, but I'm not going to like combine them into like some massive passage. They're two separate passages. Okay. Question 1. So this is, main purpose question. So we should be okay. We shouldn't have to read anything else. That's why we did our summary. A history, so main purpose for passage A, main purpose for passage B, history of state-sponsored repression in the former Confederate states, recounting of a specific case on state-sponsored repression. It doesn't mention disenfranchisement. So like this is when I'm talking about we have to pay particular attention to our language. So this just says repression, but we're not getting anything about disenfranchisement. So I don't like that. Second one, we're getting passage A, historical recounting of the methods used by Democrats to disenfranchise blacks after the Reconstruction era, rationale and ruling of a court case in disenfranchisement. Yeah, that's pretty good. It's not perfect, but, generally after Reconstruction, disenfranchising blacks, passage A, passage B, rationale and ruling. So that's pretty good. Passage A polemic against disenfranchisement. So if you don't know this word, by the way, that's an important word to know. Polemics are, generally speaking, like a really opinionated piece. So no, that's definitely not right. And a logical case against disenfranchisement. No, this is a recounting of a specific Supreme Court case. No, a history of democratic disenfranchisement in general. Yeah, I don't love that. So, right, because it just says in general, but we're really focusing on like southern states after Reconstruction. Same thing, case study of a specific instance of democratic disenfranchisement. No, because it's not mentioning the Supreme Court. So I don't like that one. Passage B should mention Supreme Court. Passage A should mention Reconstruction. E, an explanation of Democratic Party retained power after Reconstruction. That's too general, right? Because like we're not mentioning disenfranchisement at all. Like there might have been other stuff, and like we need to mention disenfranchisement. Same thing, passage B, an account of court case that illustrated how the Democratic Party retained power in a specific instance. Like yeah, but we're not mentioning disenfranchisement. So the only one that could be correct is passage B, because passage B says Democrats, disenfranchisement, Reconstruction, disenfranchisement. Those are the words I'm looking for. All right, cool. Both passages explicitly mention which of the following. Well, shoot, this is classic one. I can't do this. So let's cross out the unlikely ones and then check for the rest. Specific methods used in Texas to disenfranchise voters. I don't think passage A mentioned Texas. Alternative methods of voting. I don't know. Right of freedmen to vote seems probably in both. Historical context of laws on disenfranchisement. I don't think was anything in passage B on that, so I'm going to say no. And the Supreme Court wasn't messing with passage A. I'm pretty confident on that. So let's look at alternative methods of voting and the rights of freedmen to vote. So rights of freedmen to vote. Let's just go past B because I see it. Rights of freedmen to vote. I mean, sort of in passage B. Here it's suffrage of freedmen. So I'm like okay on C, but I want to check B. So alternative methods of voting. So alternative methods of voting. Yeah, I don't really see anything here. So I don't think there's anything about that. So yeah, rights of freedmen to vote, definitely in this. And then rights of freedmen to vote would be holding policies is inherently discriminatory and thus illegal. Yeah, so it must be that. I don't love that, but it seems pretty good. Freedmen can vote. Yeah, it seems pretty good. And it's just there's no alternative methods of voting in passage A because we just talked too much about like just disenfranchising, voters in general. All right. Paragraph 3. Which of the following is true about the relationship between the second paragraph of passage A and passage B? Second paragraph of passage A. Okay, this is violence by paramilitary groups as well as fraud to suppress black Republican voters and turn Republicans out of office. Yeah. So this one, second paragraph of passage A recounts various methods of the Democratic Party to suppress black voters. Passage B explores a Supreme Court case about a specific method of voter suppression. I mean, that's pretty good, right? Like, yeah, we definitely get specific. It's violence and fraud. And then passage B, we get this Texas case and whatever. So that's pretty good. Let's check out the rest of these. Various methods used by the American government to repress black voters. No, it's like specifically Democrats. Passage C, second paragraph, establish a rationale for the Democratic Party. No, so rationale is like the reason you do something, right? Like, no, it's just like a recounting of specific methods. All right. Second paragraph discusses methods used by the Democratic Party to suppress black voters. Passage B discusses a way in which those methods were foiled. I mean, I don't know if they were really foiled, right? This case did overturn it, but like foiling sounds like, there was some like, plot or something to like, fix it. So no. Yeah, so second paragraph, passage A explains how Democrats gained power after Reconstruction. Passage B explains how Democratic power lost power after Reconstruction. No. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the correct answer here is A. Passage like D is close, but it's just like, a way in which those methods were foiled isn't nearly as good as like a Supreme Court case about a specific method. Yeah, because passage B isn't exploring enough about the way in which it was foiled. It's more like case. All right, cool. Going pretty well. So based on what can be inferred from their titles, the relationship between which of the following pairs of documents is most analogous to the relationship between passage A and passage B. So passage A, let me make a space there. So passage A, again, we talked about is like historical recounting of Democratic voter suppression, disenfranchisement. Passage B, Supreme Court case, Texas, whatever. Brief history of Democratic disenfranchisement policies after Reconstruction. A brief legal analysis of Smith versus Allwright, a Supreme Court case on disenfranchisement. I mean, that's pretty good. That's actually pretty good. Okay, cool. Passage A, how the Democrats won the South. No, again, just way too broad. How the Democrats won the South. We're not doing disenfranchisement. We're not doing Reconstruction. Yeah, way too broad. The greatest evil, how the Democratic Party repressed the black vote post-Reconstruction. I mean, I don't know where we get the greatest evil from. I mean, that's not really mentioned in the passage. The strange but true story? Yeah, no, this sounds like a tabloid. Strange but true. Yeah, no, that can't be right. Passage A, laws and policies that allow Democrats to retain power post-Reconstruction. I mean, we don't really talk about specific laws and policies. Like, if we had a quiet answer like this, I'd want like law A, law B, law C. Like we talk about a specific law in, the Supreme Court case. And I'm just not seeing that. All right, passage A, why disenfranchisement? No, it's not a why. It's like a historical thing, but it's not a why. All right, cool. The author of the ruling in passage B, the state of Texas had simply delegated its authority to the Democratic Party. Okay, let's make sure we understand the context. So the ruling in Smith versus Allwright reversed this decision, concluding the state of Texas simply delegated its authority to the Democratic Party. Let me make sure I know what that means. Grovey v. Townsend, the Supreme Court had ruled that as this was a party policy, this is, party statute that only allows white voters. So as a party policy, it did not qualify as state action. And the ruling in Smith v. Allwright reverses this. Okay, state of Texas. Okay. All right. I think that makes sense. So it would be most likely to conclude, what about disenfranchisement efforts in the South? They were universally illegal. That seems really strong. We can only get like a very specific thing. They were most likely legal. Again, that's really strong. Although morally despicable, they were not illegal. Yeah, so again, I don't want anything that's like they're legal, they're illegal, because it's such a specific ruling. We know something, we know their specific rationale, but we don't know what they think generally about disenfranchisement efforts. Any that caused disenfranchisement of a citizen solely on the basis of his race was illegal. Yeah, that seems good, right? Because that was the whole thing, is like, you can't, disenfranchise solely on the basis of race. Like, that's the whole thing. Any that involved decisions made about absentee ballots were likely legal, unless they forbade citizens of certain race from voting. Well, no. I mean, again, I'm not going to say any that said decisions about absentee ballots, because, again, that's really strong. So I think D only makes sense. You can't discriminate based on race. We're very clear on that. All right, last one up, number 6. Which of the following, if true, would most weaken the conclusion in Smith v. Allwright? So we know the general thing is like, they originally in Grovey v. Townsend, right? It was like Democratic Party said only white voters, and they were like, okay, that's fine because that's the party and not the state. And then in Smith v. Allwright, they say, well, actually no, because you have to be because you have to be, vote in the primary for the state election. Like, they just delegated their authority. Okay. There are multiple political parties for which Smith could have voted in their primary. No, I mean, that can't work, right? Because it's still the idea of like, you can't vote in the Democratic primary. There was only one nominee per Democratic position. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that would still say like generally like you're not allowed to like vote in the, even if that was true in this specific case, like I don't think that would be true in every primary that there's only one nominee and then like you're still not allowing this guy to vote. So no. The vote itself was not binding, but merely an expression of support. I mean, that'd be pretty good, right? Because it's not actually preventing you from like participating in the election. It's just like saying like, oh, well, you can't express support. So yeah, like, you'd think the vote is actually like the voting vote, not just like support. So that's pretty good. Republican Party, I mean, that's like pretty much the same thing as A, right? Republican Party had no such restrictions on voting based on race. That's like the same thing as A. So no. Texas still maintained ultimate authority over the results of the election. I mean, that was the whole issue, right? Is like, yes, but they still delegated their authority. So no. So it must be C. All right. So that's all the thing with these paired passages. Running this back real quick, right? We did a summary of passage A and passage B. We made sure to keep them separate. We understood what they were about. And then, yeah, we went through we got basically 2 that were about main ideas. We got 1 that we had to look specifically, which was annoying. We got 1 where we had to look at specific paragraph and understand what the paragraph was about. And our summary probably could have been good enough for that, but it was good to go back. And then we got 2 about like sort of interpreting the Supreme Court ruling, which, as I'm talking, as I said, like there's lots of stuff that we don't really need to pay attention to. Like if I had just read this passage all the way through, I mean, who knows how much time I would have spent on, like, let's say, this or like this, just the random stuff in passage A that really never came up. So, this is why I do this sort of thing. Okay, cool. And then brief plug for myself. So I actually have a whole book on reading comprehension on the LSAT, and you can get it from my Gumroad page. It's called the LSAT Reading Comprehension Process. So if you're a slow reader, if you have trouble reading, let's make sure that looks more like a K. If you're a slow reader, if you have trouble reading, check out my book, buy it. It should be really helpful. This passage is straight from my book, and I have a whole bunch more passages with explanations. And if you want to look at my tutoring page in general, trevorcleetutor.com. Buy my book. All right, cool. That should look more like an exclamation point. Buy my book. Gumroad.com/TrevorClee, TrevorCleetutor.com. Hope this is helpful. Also, if you like this, if this was helpful, like and subscribe. All right, cool. I'll be releasing more videos on reading comp. I'll be releasing more videos on the LSAT in general. Like and subscribe to get more. Comment any questions you have. See you soon.